touched at the right time, and let's move on to start this very webinar on a very topical issue. So on the behalf of EGROW, let me welcome all the participants, welcome the chair and the panelists who have spared their time on this Friday afternoon to join us for this webinar, which is on a very topical issue, burning issue, or I would say a simmering issue. And the issue is, what are we learning from Ukraine war? The war which is still going on, the war which is still not ending. But various phases of war, different kind of learnings are coming up. And at various forums, these discussions are going on. So we have a very erudite panel who have a lot of experience in not only the defense forces panelists, we have foreign service ambassador with us who have served these countries. So let's start with my introducing to the chair of the session, Ambassador Manjeev Puri. Actually, he needs no introduction. Officer of 1982 Foreign Service, he served all around the globe in various capacities and ambassadors in the European Commission, Belgium, Luxembourg, and Nepal. And also he served as Deputy Permanent Representative at the United Nations. And he will be the chair of this discussion. And let me now short introduction of this. Have with us Lieutenant General P.S. Rajeshwar, Param Visesh Seva Medal, Ati Visesh Seva Medal, and Visesh Seva Medal, retired. Was the Commander-in-Chief of Andaman and Nicobar Command called Singh. And after that, he was also the Chief of Integrated Defense Staff, CISC, CISC. He's from the Regiment of Hati. And presently, he's a distinguished fellow at CLAWS, which is a think tank of the Army. We also have with us Major Sudhakar ji, which is Seva Medal, who was ex-colonel of the Mahar Regiment, the regiment which I also belong to. He was our colonel of the regiment, and he's had a very illustrious career. And among that, he's commanded his brigade, his division, been also in the UN observer at Sierra Leone. And after retirement, he's quite a popular face on a lot of TV channels as a defense analyst, as a geopolitical expert. He's also working on his PhD thesis on India-China border issue. So with that as the backdrop, I now hand over the session to the chair, Ambassador Manjeev Puri, to take on with the proceedings of the day.
Colonel MP Singh, thank you very much. I hope everyone can hear me.
Yes, we can, sir.
So at the outset, let me place on record my personal appreciation for you, Colonel Singh. But if you don't mind my saying so, I don't see his camera on, but Professor Charan Singh and your entire team at EGROW. Now, I've had the privilege of participating in several of your webinars, and I want to tell you in the past year and a half, too, taking advantage of maybe what was a disadvantageous time, you have built a tremendous cachet of thinking from India and about India and for India across the world. And I must say, this is absolutely fantastic. I'm also very happy that, you've broadened the outlook from purely, let me say, the area of finance, economy, and of course, financial economic security are extremely important, but into maybe the nuts and bolts of all of this, strategic affairs, defense, and so on. And so extremely grateful to you for this, and thank you very much for asking me to join you here today. And I'm glad to see Professor Charan Singh has sort of switched on his camera. Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, Charan is there, and good evening to one and all. I am from EGROW. My name is Ashok Vishandas. I have seen you, Ambassador Manjeev Puri ji, and our other panelists. I'm very excited to listen to you.
Vishandas ji, thank you so much. It's always very nice. Now, I want to, before we begin, and Colonel MP Singh has already introduced the two distinguished speakers today, Lieutenant General Rajeshwar as well as Major General Sudhakar ji. But I just want to say that, a few days back when I was approached to chair this session, so I laughed and asked them, why me? And Professor Charan Singh, in his usual manner, turned around कि foreign service को defense services के साथ लगा देने में बहुत अच्छा. So, I want to take you back to something else. This was said by him in a light-hearted manner, but coming to our subject matter, let me tell you, it isn't for nothing that we are both housed in South Block. For the people who we don't think much of, they had the prescience and the good sense as to what is the combination that takes a nation state form. And I think that's the thinking that underpins, no matter the humorous and the facetious elements of all of this. It is the fact that, these are the two elements of statecraft and state power, which are particularly important. Now, today and now for the last 8 or 9 months, something that some people predicted would last 14 days or 7 days or at most 1 month has gone on and on. Of course, Indian television has got tired of it. It doesn't appear anywhere. But, the major channels from the Western world, they are focused. And why are they focused? They are focused for a very simple reason. You know, whether we like it or not, whether we accept who is whose proxy, the fact of the matter is that for a large number of them, and I'm referring to the Europeans, this has become a matter not of existentialist kind of threat, but certainly one of extreme concern. None of them would have thought that you would have had situations of acute institutional problems dealing with energy. How many would have thought that the entire South, the third world, would have faced a major food grains and fertilizer crisis to the point that they are turning around and frankly, they don't care who is to blame. They simply say, you guys are to blame. And a bit of it is simply saber rattling. Don't forget, the leaders of the African Union went to Sochi and met President Putin. Much as our Western colleagues would like them to say that they should come to them and vote with them, the votes in the United Nations have been particularly interesting. While in general, the votes have not gone in favor of the Russians, they vetoed the Security Council resolution. In the Human Rights Council, you could not get, which is, let me say, a slightly one step above a General Assembly kind of, best endeavor vote. Slightly more than that, you couldn't get the vote through. And these are the realities and hard realities. However, we are gathered here to try and see that in this 9-month war, starting off with a situation of tomorrow it's over and it's all going to be taken over, to a situation where yesterday the Russians had to themselves announce that they are pulling back. Now, you can give any kind of spin to all of that, but the facts remain for everyone to see. Look at what's been happening to Ukraine, a country of 46 million people. About 15 million have become refugees in all parts of the world, mostly in Europe. The country has taken a huge hit in terms of its infrastructure. Its life was generally European standard, if not the richest of European countries, certainly the standards of most other European countries. Today, the situation is that for communication, you need Mr. Elon Musk to provide you his satellite communication. No one says that it's not possible. But look at where they have been reduced in their own state of play. They have faced all other kinds of miseries, the kind of rocket attacks that they've had to face, but their spirit lives on. And isn't that fantastic in its own way? Now, we have been a very unique country, which has taken, if you don't mind my saying so, a bit of a multi-aligned path, middle of the road path, and have advocated consistently that, war is not the way forward. And the Prime Minister said at his meeting with President Putin, this is not an era. Particularly fine, good. Are people listening? I don't know the answers to all that. I have my own views on all of those subjects. But for me today, what is particularly interesting is to hear you, Lieutenant General Rajeshwar Rao, sir, first, especially since we've read the paper that you've written, which is particularly, it's interesting because A, you sketched the entire history of these 9 months and a little bit before that, what happened, who is to blame. It's very difficult to come to a conclusion, X is to blame or Y. Possibly the answer is everybody is to blame. But the lessons learned are particularly important. And I want to particularly compliment you on one thing. For most of us, the big, I won't say takeaways as yet, but the big worry points are what are the lessons of this Ukraine conflict vis-a-vis Russia, Ukraine, etc. And at some stage, if I have the opportunity, I'll certainly share with you what my views are in that in terms of small countries and where they stand. And there's one that you have mentioned only in passing, Taiwan, but without any doubt, that's the centerpiece of it. But what I found very fascinating was that you looked at some of these aspects from our perspective and said, well, sure, there are many other important elements happening in the world. But from our perspective, is there any kind of theoretical leading to practical ideas which can be drawn by anyone else? And you mentioned China, rightly so, which gives them a kind of locus to do what they're doing and how they can go about it, etc. Very fascinating. You picked on a statement by the External Affairs Minister, very interesting statement, which says that the example of Ukraine does not exactly fit. And I like that. As an analyst, the important word was it's all right, it doesn't fit exactly, but it fits somewhere or the other. Here comes the analysis of that. And that in depth analysis that you've made on various subjects, points, both military as well as strategic, and more than anything else, the ideas of what all of this could fructify. Sir, I was particularly impressed. I don't know if others have read the paper, but I'll stop now. Let me ask Lieutenant General Rajeshwar now to take the screen. Sir, the general rules here are you get to speak for about slightly more than 15 minutes and slightly less than 20. You will be followed by Major General Saab, and then we'll take some questions. And for the questions to all those who are listening in, sir, the general rules are the directors of EGROW switch on their cameras and speak out their questions. For all others, I would request please note them in the chat box. They'll be monitored by Colonel MP Singh and his team, and it'll be brought out. We try to stick to time quite exactly and try and follow a bit of a structured methodology. And so I will stop now. Lieutenant General Saab, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Ambassador Manjeev Puri. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Right. And Colonel MP Singh and General Sudhakar ji, wonderful to see you all here. It's really an honor that you're giving me a platform to share my views. Some things I have written about, so that, and the article was circa September, this year. So 2 more months have gone by. So what I'll do now in the next about 10 to 15 minutes is because a number of other viewers may not have read or may not have followed, but I've been following it for the last 9 months from a military and a strategic viewpoint as to how that will play into the military domain. So at the outset, it's very clear that there is geopolitical turmoil and there is a polarizing world, which was not the case before February. So before February, we could choose what we wanted to do and continue to do that. At the moment, I think the fields have got a little restricted all across. People are actually pushing us because of the war to take sides. And, that is coming up more and more as the war drags on. There is a deep sense of insecurity in nations, notwithstanding the fact that compared to, let's say, 30 to 40 years back, we are very formidable militarily and even economically, and, many instruments, other instruments of national power all across the world are available and have been exercised. So the problem is misperception. When you see an adversary, what you construe of his statements, you could have a bad judgment and you could make a bad. Another thing is, since conventional wars were understood not to have, they had gone out of form in that sense. People were prosecuting either hybrid wars or proxy wars, which means keep the war fighting, below a threshold. Try and get your objectives without a conventional war. But since February, what we are seeing is conventional wars have a place. Now, I fully agree. This is an era of peace. There is no doubt. But I think one of the biggest things that everybody is challenged with is, and what I can see President Zelensky of Ukraine would have been, is if the other side gets into your country, does it catch you napping? What happens to you? Do you fight it back, or do you wait for the world community to help you? After all, people have to be formidable themselves. They have to stand on their own feet. They can't wait for the others. And that is the case, I think, for India. I mean, we would like to do things ourselves, with or without assistance. Then is, on the Russian side, when you look at it, they went straight for the jugular and wanted to go to Kiev. But I think they underestimated their own capabilities vis-a-vis the opponents. And therefore, there was, the political and the military end states did coincide. So I think political aims, whether we are looking at any of our adversaries or any other countries looking at it, that must coincide with what is your present understanding of available military capabilities. And it should be realistic, which means the strategic and military community, before any of these events, if they are happening frequently, must put across a very true picture of what we have. And therefore, what is the aim that we could get, if at all we are pushed? I'm not saying you have to go to it, but if you are pushed to defend or pushed to war. Now, the next thing is, and we are seeing that over the last 9 months, there have been tremendous economic fallout. Coupled with the pandemic which preceded, this entire thing has actually, cast a lot of doubts on the supply chain management. Inflation has gone up because of that, and because of this, every price has gone up, which means a lot of the money, the country's money in reserves, whether it is ours, and I'm talking more of ours, will actually end up being made available to those who have been economically hit, and that is natural throughout the world. Europe is facing, you have seen the fall of euro, pound, yen, between 20 to 25%, even the rupee. So all this is happening. But this is, of course, vis-a-vis the dollar. So we have to be prepared for this, what I'm saying, nothing more. I mean, it will happen, so we are dealing with it. And this is happening when the war is at a distance from us. It started just before, when the war clouds were there, then during, and now, at some point it will drag on till after the war. The energy crisis in Europe is looming large, but they are trying to diversify. And that's why also I think there are some of the strategic targets that you're looking at, power plants and all that, which in the Ukraine war were hit. So I can imagine what kind of impact they will have going forward. Another interesting thing that we have learned, other than the economic sanctions, were the technological sanctions, especially the chips. The moment these, have dried up, you are seeing on one side, Russia is doing everything to obtain it from anywhere that it can, which means increasingly its precision guided munitions will have a problem. One of the aspects which Ambassador Puri mentioned was the national resolve. I think that has been fantastic, and I think that has got lessons for us. It is the people who actually make a lot of in the nation. Billions. Sorry. If somebody can mute there. Am I audible?
Sir, please continue. I'll request the audience to
Yeah.
please mute your mics. Please ensure, because one mic which is unmuted can disturb the whole sequence. Please unmute. Please mute your mics. Sir, please continue.
Okay. Thank you. At a level lower than the strategic level, which is the military level or the operational level, I would call, we are seeing the influx of a number of drones. And this is not only to see what is not otherwise available in the optoelectrical, in the electronic, in the acoustic media, or signal intelligence, but it is playing a lot of uh, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance roles. It is also some sort of variation of a drone, which is a loitering munition, which means a drone with some capability, offensive capability, is also being used, whether it is javelin or rather it is switchblade on one side, or whatever the Russians are using at the moment. Okay. Uh, then, of course, there is a lot of firepower which is extending and interdicting huge formations, which is like what the Americans have given, which is the HIMARS, which is a rocket system with long range, and the Kinzhal missile, which is being fired by the Russians from the air. So that is doing a lot of damage. Another thing is what we are seeing in cyber operations is just before the war, for almost about 6 months, friendly forces to Ukraine came in and hardened their infrastructure. But still, another innovative thing was they moved all their data away to servers outside Ukraine and in some protected cloud. And they had a plan to switch most of their data from where it was residing at the commencement of war, which they saw, out of that space. So they have protected themselves. So that is going on, and these patterns are being noticed by the NATO countries. So that is also happening. Then is, of course, Ambassador Puri also mentioned the role of Starlink, the SpaceX launch of number of satellites, which has actually given rise to communications. It has restored that. And also, I would, I'm fascinated by a company which it has done is, which works actually for the US defense, which is Palantir. It has, integrated a very fast movement of data analysis modules, which provide data to the shooter. So it comes down very fast from a satellite, which otherwise we know takes maybe hours or days or hours to download its data and to be analyzed. So that is one tremendous technological improvement that has happened, or innovation which has happened. Then we've also seen in the last 2 months a very which is military deception, where the Ukrainians posed that they would go to the south, pulled the Russian forces to the south, lull them into that kind of sense, which is the Kherson region where they're now active, and the Russians have pulled back a little bit from the Dnipro River. But in Kharkiv, they attacked. And when they attacked, the Russians were found wanting. So there was military deception at its best. Then, of course, notwithstanding these 8-9 months of war, there is that spirit of counteroffensive, which the Ukrainians have shown, and which is a big thing actually, coming at the end of a very exhausting kind of period in war. Of course, the war is going to continue, but this will make a huge difference. Then another thing that we are seeing is, of the other things, the small versus big aspect. Will big platforms survive? Therefore, do you have to buy small platforms or acquire them? Then the interesting aspect of crowdfunding. Then civilian armies which are fighting. Then groups like Anonymous, which are pan the world. You don't know whose they are, but they are tracking every statement. So the power of social media is so huge. The war is being fought with, on Twitter and TikTok, and not through statements. And of course, the man behind the machine, he's become very important. So I think some of these are the takeaways as far as we are concerned. So my sense is we need to do about 5 things as India. One is, I think we need to develop our own and articulate, which is, it could be a combination of open national security strategy and one which is which is need to know basis, which is for the guys who are within the services, all aspects of the government sectors, who need to know what they need to do specifically, and which will have an impact or implication on the others. The second thing is, I think there is we need to develop capabilities which are non-traditional. So we need to put a lot of effort on that, and therefore I think the defense budget needs to cater for that. And the point is, you cannot wait for any operation, somebody attacking, to start this process, because even to make any systems, as we clearly know, the best of the systems with the capabilities that we have need 5 years, maybe 10, right? So I think you need to start now if you're looking at or anticipating that we could be pushed into such a situation, say 4 to 5 years from now. Acquisition needs agility, so that is of course a process driven thing, and there is no way out. Otherwise we will end up making emergency procurement from people who will sell it at a humongous price. That is, I think, a danger we need to avoid. In Atmanirbhar Bharat, I think my sense is we need to collaborate with industrially or technologically advanced nations. While we do what we can do best, refine the processes, and go ahead what we have, but I think we should be realistic. So that is my sense. And then warfare is in 6 domains. So I would say, I think we need to integrate the air, land, sea with cyber, space, and electromagnetic spectrum. So warfare, I think we need to look at it from all these 6 domains. I'll leave it at that. So I rest at the moment. Thank you so much.
General Saab, thank you very much. And, as could only have been expected from you, we are dot on track. So you made very interesting points, some very fascinating ones. The business of whole of country, whole of government approach, I think goes without saying. The question of building your own capacities and capabilities, also fantastic. Non-traditional threats and possibilities of action, I think they are particularly important. And although your entire paper is vis-a-vis the country to our north and east, has this not been used extensively by the country to our west, which in fact is collaborating with the Ukrainians? So, life is very interesting that the Pakistanis are supplying maybe even Chinese equipment to the Ukrainians. Life is quite complicated. This game is played at several levels and in several ways. I will, at some stage when we start the question and answers, ask you what is the implications of being, how should I say, some kind of a proxy. But let's leave it at that, General Sir. Major General Sudhakar, let me turn to you as a infantry officer. And let me say this, that I know we've had Lieutenant General Rajeshwar Rao, an artillery officer, and it's his ilk which is really firing all the shots in Ukraine. If you notice, General Sir, the use of all other forces, all other kinds of powers, even the Russians have been very reticent. I don't know what else they could have done or not done. That's a matter we can debate. But, artillery really, and kind of old-fashioned, is what they've been using. But, at the end of the day, General Saab, at least me, old-fashioned guy, is a great believer that it's the boots on the ground. And you can keep firing these artillery rockets and do whatever else you want, sir. The boots on the ground. And I'm very delighted we have an infantry officer. And that too, someone who has had a United Nations experience in a very different but very difficult terrain. where even language barriers are there in the western part of Africa, because the experience and the understanding of those who actually have to finally do things, and it continues to be the good old two-legged lot to whom it falls. I think that would be very valuable for all of us who are listening in here. Uh, and General Saab, all I can say is very much looking forward to hearing you. The screen is yours.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. At the very outset, I must thank the EGROW for having invited me to participate in this very important webinar. And particularly the chairman of EGROW, Dr. Arvind Virmani, the CEO, Professor Charan Singh. And before I get going ahead with my talk, must compliment the chair. It's wonderful to reconnect with somebody who has happened to come to NDC and deliver a talk, and also have met Ambassador Manjeev Puri a number of places in the past. And what better than to have your own directing staff or the instructor having preceded my talk itself. Much of the pie or the share of the talk has already been covered and things have been made easy for me. There is nothing much left for the infantryman to cover. But having said that, let me just take off from where Ambassador left. The proxy. Ladies and gentlemen, the environment in the global order today it was already polarized and complex. Till 2019, from the beginning of 2020, it has become even more complex. To me, when you speak about proxy, who's proxy? Is Ukraine a proxy of NATO and US? And as an extension of the corollary, if I put a question to the audience, to me it appears that Russia is a proxy to China as well. So if that be so, what is the start point of this conflict? Yes, I'm fully aware of the audience, very well-read, and they have their footprint in the media, very well established. But we can't make any much headway, although it is taken for granted. Somebody told me that keep it simple. I'm from National Defense Academy, and people used to advise us, keep everything simple. So to keep everything simple, being an infantryman, I would start with simplicity. The statement of fact, ladies and gentlemen, on 24th of February 2022, out of the blue, where the entire world was talking that this conflict will never take place, including Zelensky himself. He was challenging the world order that conflict cannot take place. Suddenly, early morning, 24th of February, the breaking news comes that Putin has announced a formal announcement of a conventional war, invading Ukraine and escalating the Russia-Ukrainian war, which began way back in 2015. And let me also remind the audience that in 2014, don't be flummoxed by the input which I am sharing. Most of us know that in July 2014, the situation escalated into an international crisis and put the US and European Union at odds with Russia when a Malaysian Airlines flight was shot down over Ukrainian airspace, killing all 298 on board. So what is it, ladies and gentlemen? Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because Ukraine per se, as far as the geography is concerned, it is located in the crossroads of the centrality of the Eastern Europe and the Eurasian region. The location is such, with the kind of legacy of the dispute which has got extended from the beginning of Cold War till the end of Cold War, it has got very, very serious and complicated by a single most important factor in the international order, lack of trust or the trust deficit. How am I saying this? Was it a lack of trust on part of Russia or the Western powers? Or was it a trust deficit on the part of the entire global order, having the League of Nations having collapsed, having gone in for a United Nations? Has it become a defunct organization? With the end of Cold War, ladies and gentlemen, in 1991, and when the Berlin Walls had collapsed, both the Germanys were actually joining. If I recall correctly, James Baker had paid a visit to Mikhail Gorbachev, and there was a commitment. Maybe in some white paper it must be endorsed that you do this, not an inch of the NATO will expand to the east from where it is today. If that was the commitment, if a patient goes to the doctor, it is after the doctor how he diagnoses. He diagnoses the ailment as a disease or as a symptom. Well, if we are looking for the disease, because unless we go down to the root of the problem, we cannot find a solution. If you cannot find a solution, the hostility cannot be brought to an end. If the hostilities cannot be brought to an end, the economy's recession, which is actually mounting by the day, will keep mounting with the days coming by. And the world order, which is absolutely in disorder today, there is hardly anything in order, is actually going to hold us captive through and through. Aren't we all, as citizens of this world order or international order, responsible to be your solution provider? Here is an infantryman, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to say that Ukraine, let's not take it for granted. To the north is Belarus, to the west is Europe, to the east is Russia, to the south is Black Sea, and to the southeast is Sea of Azov. And there is a swath of land which is connecting along the eastern corridor with a peninsula called as Crimea Peninsula. Let's be very clear about the geography. And let me take the mind back to the historical perspective. With the historical perspective, let me proceed with a little bit of geopolitical relevance as to why Ukraine is what it is today. Ukraine, once upon a time, was part of the undivided or the USSR. In the year 1991, it is well known to all of us. Yes, they got divided into a couple of nation states. Russia happened to be the largest one. To my understanding, ladies and gentlemen, Russia, by virtue of having taken over the responsibility, at least I would say moral responsibility of the erstwhile bigger nation, so-called USSR, did not have any control over the Ukraine, the land of Ukraine. So therefore, what does it mean? It means to me that anything who loses control of a piece of land which happens to be at a location which is a primary buffer state plays a very important role as far as the national security of the host nation is concerned, that is Russia. Apply yourself with the theory. Let's say, hypothetically we speak, if China comes to a backyard at Hambantota and masses the ships like the way it has already started doing, are we as Indians going to feel comfortable about the activities of China? Certainly not. So therefore, what is the problem then? Then the security apparatus or the architecture which should have come about way back in 91 when the Warsaw Pact collapsed, perhaps to my understanding, a new architecture of the NATO should have been proposed and put in place. The question that rises is, why wasn't the security apparatus and the architecture put in place? Was there a dubious kind of an understanding, or was it the trust deficit which actually multiplied by the time, because of which Putin has been pushed to a corner and made to resort to a course of action which is militating or vitiating the very existence of the new world order? This new world order, we always expected, every one of us, post 1991, that there would be some semblance of rules-based international order. Has it come our way? I don't think so. Why did Serbia take place? In 99, despite all oppositions from Russia and China in the United Nations Security Council, why did the NATO and the Americans, why did they carry out aerial raid for 79 to 82 days? Who's going to answer these questions in the global new order? If rules-based international orders are being expected from the Eastern Hemisphere, so should it be applied for the Western as well. And in the bargain, who are the sufferers? The global South, the new terminology which is finally taking shape thanks to Ukraine and Russian warfare, which is in complete progress now. So now that brings me, ladies and gentlemen, I have highlighted in the process of past 5-7 minutes is that the location, geographic or the geopolitical location of Ukraine is actually one of the important factors because of which the conflict is still going on. It will carry on for a couple of more months, maybe another year and a half. Another factor is the historical perspective. Russia, for all you know, they defeated the Napoleon, they defeated the Hitler, they defeated all of the Mongolians also had invaded this particular territory. They had defeated. So when the legacy of or the reputation of a nation state goes on identity of a pride and a respect for oneself, and the self-esteem of the nation is so high and strong, will the same Russia ever accept, or any nation in the place of Russia? I am by no means am I trying to be pro-Russia. I am only playing the devil's advocate as a neutral person. Will any nation ever compromise the ego? And when something like this happens right at the doorstep, when Poland is being militarized, when the ships are coming into the Black Sea, when you have missiles being placed all over, when you have the NATO and a number of NATO members are expanding between 91 to 2022, the figures have gone up. They are reaching as many as 30, and there are 2 more likely to join very soon. When the security of a border state is actually at stake, which is posing a threat to the mere existence of Russia, is there any harm in Russia having taken recourse to what it is doing today? So, be that as it may, ladies and gentlemen, I would come straight to the point of the lessons that in my opinion, should be flagged in relation to its application to a western border and the northern border. Some of the issues, most of the issues have already been covered by Lieutenant General Rajeshwar. I shall touch upon the important ones only. As per me, the first and foremost thing is never underestimate your enemy. The entire operation, despite the military might, it's almost 5 to 6 times more than that of Ukrainian combat resources. Russians, they underestimated the Ukrainians. The botched of the operation, the intelligence they received was flawed. The assumptions they made was flawed. The initial special operations concept they made was based on incorrect input. So therefore, to me, no matter how small the nation may be, it will be incorrect on the mightier or the stronger nation not to underestimate. One. Second, about the conventional wars of the past, it has been more than adequately covered by the preceding speaker. All I would say is that the conventional, what we are talking of, something which was being practiced in the past, it will start assuming a new dimension, what we call as hybrid warfare today, a mix of cyber, electromagnetic assault, space attack by the drones, or you have shooting down or blacking out the grids, power grids, etc., attacking your domestic flights like it happened with the Indigo. So these kind of things will be a new normal. What we are calling as a conventional operation of the past, which we are not agreeing to, that is, it is still applicable even now. I would say the very terminology of conventionalism or conventional operation also will include factors like the ones which I have mentioned in times ahead. Third and most important point is the character of war, as per me, is going to undergo drastic changes. It has undergone drastic changes. Whole of nation approach has been covered by the Lieutenant General. To me, what matters is that the time has come in the Indian subcontinent, in our own country. Every nation, every citizen in the nation has to be like a soldier. It is not only the soldiers who are getting recruited, going to the battlefield, they have to contest or fight against the enemy. No. The enemy will come, it is attacking us in most invisible form, it is carrying out subversion in our society, it has penetrated. China, when we talk about the enemy, our mind goes towards Pakistan. No, I'm saying China has penetrated into our society, so much so that out of 10 products in your house, just go and carry out a random check. I can bet 5 years back, it was 6 out of 10. Now it will be surely more than 10 items that you have made in China. That is the level of penetration, ladies and gentlemen. The level of penetration, when I say it is about the cyber attack, when I say about this, they have penetrated into a banking system. Their basic strategy is to collapse our democracy, all the pillars of democracy, by 3 warfare strategy: psychological, legal, and media. Next point I wish to highlight is that the role of disruptive technology. This is the new normal of the conventional warfare. What is the meaning of new role of disruptive technology? It is not only the drones. There are many things like drones, autonomous support systems. We have quantum computing. We have the artificial intelligence, which has come into in a big way. So this is a new normal. China has already gone in for developing 3 different kinds of commands or the organizations. They had a rocket force, but the rocket force has been modernized with the new state-of-the-art technology and the gun systems. They have a strategic force command, and they also have something which is dealing with basically the artificial intelligence under 3 different new names: mechanization, informatization, and the intelligentization. Informatization, most of us do not understand. It is basically to deny information to the enemy, to cripple the command, communication, and the control centers of the enemy. Cripple his warfighting machinery and beat him back nice and properly. And intelligentization means the artificial intelligence and its application. So all these things which have come into being, in addition to air, land, and sea, are actually the new normal of a conventional warfare. We have to prepare for it. And the inflection point I have highlighted: drones. Whether the heavy platform, which has been discussed by the preceding speaker, I'm not going to dwell time on that. But all I would say that rather than aircraft, I'm not by any means saying I'm not discounting the aircrafts, whether they will be required in a future time frame or not, whether the tanks will be a necessity or not. But what I'm saying is India prepared to face the threats as obtaining or as is relevant in case of Ukraine and Russia? No. We need to go faster and develop our capability much faster, as if it was to be done yesterday or has been done yesterday. Some people with minimum basic training, they have been seen to be handling the drones, the sophisticated drones. These drones, they have got the capability to take the payload, discharge on the target, effectively engage, come back, reload, again go back. That is the kind of level of technology we have to actually build up. I am speeding up, Ambassador, the FIBUA, the fighting in built-up area. We need to correlate with our western border and the northern border. When you look at the western border, we have built-up areas, and we have population is very hostile. It is anti-India. It is something like the Battle of Kharkiv, something like which happened in Kherson, something like Kiev. So when you have a hostile population in the built-up area, then the fighting becomes very, very tedious and time-consuming. Your attrition level will be pretty high. So we need to keep in mind, so what next? How do you overcome this? Do you bypass the built-up area? You can't bypass. If you have objective in the depth, how do you go into Pakistan? What is it that we are looking for? Are we looking for Pak-occupied Kashmir to be reintegrated back with India, or Gilgit-Baltistan, or some, what is that little enclave which has been ceded to China in 1963? Shaksgam Valley. Or we are looking at something else, going into Pakistan, into the hinterland. For me, as far as an independent soldier, retired soldier, I would say, let's be pragmatic. Let's get back and integrate the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir with our mainland. Let's get our Gilgit-Baltistan sooner the better. We are on the 75th year. Next point, the ecosystem of non-state actors, ladies and gentlemen. Our western border is at the epicenter of global terrorism. When you have terrorists, as many as 18,000 put together, ISIS, Khorasan, Haqqanis, you have Taliban, you have Tehrik Taliban, you have Al-Qaeda, everyone there, it's a training center. When you have a repository of these kind of elements, I'll speed up. When you have a repository of these kind of people there will be a force multiplier as far as our adversary is concerned. So therefore, we need to keep in mind the media glare. Whatever happens in a future conflict will happen in absolute media glare. Nothing can be hidden. The next point is about the new policing system. Any modern warfare taking place, the administration within the armed forces has to infuse the civil administration for policing, for guiding people, for making human corridors, for making students have a smooth passage like the way we have done in the recent past. And two more points. One point is about the NBC. The chemical warfare can be easily triggered by anyone, and particularly the non-state actors. We need to keep this in mind. It's a very important lesson as far as we are concerned. And the nuclear saber rattling should not be taken for granted. Nuclear saber rattling has changed the complete character of warfare in Ukraine and Russia. Had he not declared them absolutely in the emergency status on 25th of February, perhaps, I think, to my mind and understanding, the dimension and the quantum and the intensity of the conflict would have been much larger, with expecting many more threats coming from the Western Front. The strategic communication has played a very, very important role. It is not the defeat and the victory. It is how you develop the narrative before the people who have to decide in their mind that, yes, it is a victory here. Ukraine, having lost the war, they still won because of strategic communication, because of the social media. So therefore, this is an important factor that we need to keep in mind. We do not have a verticals of information warfare as on today. India must go in for a structured, formal vertical headed by a minister dealing with all such kind of gray zone elements to defeat or be prepared for a future warfare. Last but not the least is the geopolitical lessons that we have learned, that any agreement which is signed between multilateral or bilateral parties and duly endorsed and supported by the United Nations or the Global Apex Organization must be transparent, accountable, and the stakeholders must be held responsible. This takes reference to the agreements which were signed in 1994 and 2008. The rest of the world cannot be taken hostage for the conflict which is going on. The implications will be felt by everyone. And the global south has got an important role to play, ladies and gentlemen. This is my last point. Out here, I would like to stress on the fact that India today is the only nation in the world, thanks to our diplomats. They have done a commendable, outstanding job all over the world. Today, India is the only nation which is respected from the heart, whose credibility has taken a multi-million type of jump. It is force multiplied. It is actually loved by one and all. There is no nation, whether you talk about Middle East or the European Union, or go towards the Eurasian countries, or go to the Far East or Southeast Asia, or to the Latin America. India is everyone's love. With that, I give it back to the chair. I hope I've done justice to the subject, sir.
General Sudhakar, thank you very much. In my opinion, spoken like a true infantryman, the person who went in and said
Sir, ask me a
the way it
question.
needed to be
Press the action button. Then let go and start talking.
Hello, is all okay? Colonel MP Singh, can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Please continue, sir. You're clear, sir. There's some, I think, which got pressed.
No, it's fine. General Saab, I must say it was absolutely fascinating to hear both of you. An analysis in terms of what we need to do for taking on the large, let me say, huge, big elephant as far as we are concerned, the Chinese. You're mentioning Pakistan, the issues which are germane there, and which, frankly, no matter what we say and whose proxy is who, they are the ones of instant and immediate nature as far as we are concerned, and extremely important. You made one or two very interesting points, and I'm using this time to request participants, if you've understood everything, what can I say? Otherwise, if you have some questions, please write them in the chat box. But General Sudhakar, you made one very interesting point, that perhaps, attack and get defeated, it's cheaper than peace in the long run. This was a very interesting point that you mentioned, and you then brought in Humber, Tota, etc. I think it's a very long and a completely different EGROW session, which will have to go into all of these particular things. But nations play games, and should you reach the point that your tether has come to an end relatively quick or not, well, there is a price to be paid for that. And are we seeing it for the Russians? I don't know. Are we seeing it as far as even the Americans are concerned? After all, while the President Biden and many people are saying that the Reds haven't done as well, the fact is that they've got the House of Representatives. So, there are various factors which need to be looked into account. We need to see. But for me, it was fascinating how both of you have, drawn lessons from something which is relatively far from us, but lessons which are of extreme importance as far as we are concerned. A whole of government approach being, let me say, more cognizant of the newer non-traditional methods of both defense and offense and the need for an integrated approach, particularly important. Colonel MP Singh, we're waiting for you to put some things on the screen. What should I say? Do we have about 10 minutes?
We can, sir. We can have about 10 minutes, and
Okay.
questions have already started coming in.
Please, I can't see them, so I don't know. Will you read them out?
May I read them out, sir?
Yes, please read them out.
Some observations are there, like
And everyone saying good evening to us. Thank you.
yeah. So this is
Vijay
like,
Jariwala.
yeah, Vijay Jariwala is saying India's position in hunger index has increased. In this case, how would be desirable to allocate more for defense? So he's not mentioned it for whom this question is. I would request any of them in case you can comment.
No,
That
so,
is that question.
Karan Saab, let me read these. This is a valid question, a general question. After all, not only General Rajeshwar and General Sudhakar ji would mention the need for, spending more, not only because you're a growing country, a growing economy, but because you're faced with real threats. That's something we all understood. Guns and butter, it's an old issue. We all understand that. And, I also, in a sense, empathize with the person who's asked the question. But, the answers are not particularly easy that can be given here. There's one from Professor S. Vijay Kumar. He says that in his opinion, darkness of Ukraine is highly appreciable to defend their motherland. Or clarness, dearness.
Dearness, it is dearness.
Dearness of
Dearness.
Yeah.
Of
I would
Ukraine is
turn
highly
to
appreciable.
General Sudhakar ji, because he mentioned this. He mentioned this particular thing. Stand up and take it, even if it means quite a lot. And is there any other one odd question we can ask him? Then maybe we'll ask one or two
I can
questions.
even if Professor Vishendas or
Then
Professor
there is
Charan Singh
Mr.
wants to
Mohammad
ask
Rasool
anything,
Karim,
we can give the chance.
who says that Zelensky is destroying Ukraine only for his wrong decision. Sir, you are not wrong. Many people believe that. But reality and how people of the country look at it, that's a different matter. I don't know the answers. But let's turn to Major General Sudhakar ji. Sir, the last two questions.
Platform is ready, sir. Can I hear? I am a later
Somebody
able to
interfering in this.
Let's.
Mahinder, can you repeat the question because your voice was breaking? I couldn't make
Yeah.
out what you were saying. Ambassador, if you can repeat the question, please.
Sir, please open the chat box.
Okay.
And you will see that there are two questions from Professor S. Vijay Kumar about the dareness of Ukraine and his feeling that this needed to be appreciated, and Mr. Mohammad Rasool Karim, who thinks that Zelensky has taken all the wrong decisions. Let me hear from you, since you really talked about Ukrainians doing what they have to do for themselves.
Okay. Firstly, can I, may I?
Yes, please.
If I have understood the question, Professor, it is pointing towards basically Zelensky as the leader of the nation, Ukraine, whether he's taken the right decision in taking his nation to a disaster or he's taken a wrong decision. Have I understood your question partially, if not wrong?
I think that's a good way of looking at the question. And
You
the
see,
two questions
to
get
me,
answered in one.
as a soldier in military science, there are no comics, there is no dramatics. It is either your nation is the first, you have to defend your nation. Has he been able to defend the nation?
Yes,
Anything
absolutely.
which does not contribute towards the nation, safety of the nation, I think all the
25.
dramatics have not paid off. So therefore, Indian philosophy of diplomacy and dialogue, to my mind, would have actually paid off a greater dividend. And
Yes,
which
of course.
if you look back in the month of April, I'm sure such a learned audience would be aware of the fact that there was a peace talk which had been brokered. It was brokered thrice, three different timelines. The first one was in April. And it is at the behest of I wouldn't like to take the name of the country, one of the Western powers, and they all got together, put pressure on Zelensky, and they had already made a headway. The Russia was actually had decided to pull back. So these things nobody is talking because the information warfare is actually selling his story. He's busy coming in different kinds of magazines and different kinds of video clips and all. But if he really meant safety of the country, in my opinion, I may be wrong, ladies and gentlemen, as a soldier, I personally feel that he had greater stakes to have actually shouldered more responsibility for his nation. Peace is better than a conflict. Dialogue, diplomacy would have
You are
given
right,
better
sir.
result. I hope I have answered
That's
your
not
question,
wrong.
Professor.
Yes, yes.
General Sahab, thank you. General
Thank you, sir.
Rajeshwar, let me turn to you, sir, with this one question on NATO's help to Ukraine. Of course, the gentleman has asked about what is our role in that. Let me leave that out. Let me just ask you. In some senses, some people would say, so what has Mr. Putin gained? NATO has become larger, bigger, and in some senses, even without the direct participation of the biggest player in NATO, they can say they've also demonstrated victory in the world. What do you have to say, sir?
Sir, this is an important question. If you look at NATO, yes, there has been an inflection point in their thought process where individual nations are now spending more on defense, or at least their focus hereafter will be more on defense allocations, acquisitions, and utilization. But B, what is also interesting is if you look at it, it is Ukraine which is getting battered, and all NATO weapon systems are being employed out there. If you recall from 2014 to 2022, almost 7.5 years, it has been US and predominantly in NATO and European troops who have trained the Ukrainians. So they have seen now, how their equipment, ammunition, training, and doctrine is helping the Ukrainians. So it is something like a test bed crucible. So this is panning out for people who are not doing the fighting themselves, but actually, it is serving the purpose that Ukraine is taking the brunt. And as far as the biggest fish, because without US, I think NATO doesn't stand anywhere. For US, this is the opportunity where he's actually weakening Russia, right? So, I mean, this is actually he's in a sweet spot, I would say, because everything is happening the way he wants to play it. He puts the pressure on the rest of the world as well. He tests out whether China will actually, he controls Europe, Chinese technological bridge. He controls, almost everything. And if he settles the energy for Europe, I think it's a win-win for him without having actually directly fought. And what is happening actually, which you will see, is most of the aid which the Americans are giving are military aid. So in the billions of dollars that you see, it is the 6 to 8 big companies which are going to, keep making equipment. If US stocks are going and fighting in, fortifying Ukraine and NATO, they'll get replenished, and that aid will be announced. So it is something which is actually already happening. So in fact, I had a deep look at what they are doing. So this is what appears to the plain eye.
NATO is
And
accepted.
I think it suits the West at the
Why the
moment,
NATO against
while Ukraine actually
accepted?
suffers from the war.
Accepted.
Sir, very well said. I mean, I would agree with you, but at the end of the day,
Accepted.
all these kinds of foreign policy strategic affairs are domestic. And while for the first time since 9/11, the entire political establishment in the United States came behind support for Ukraine and willingness to do anything, the fact is the House of Representatives has been lost, and people are today talking about some kind of moderation, whatever minimal amount, etc., that may happen. So we don't know. That's the nature of several of these particular games that get played. But I want to take you all back to the original issue of proxy. And without going into, proxies at very third, fourth generational level, but straightforward level. And there I see there is some kind of thing, even as far as we are concerned. Look, the Europeans have taken the single biggest hit other than the Ukrainians who are being destroyed. The Russians are also taking a hit, but they are in it. So what can one say about it? The Europeans, many would say, we did nothing. But the fact is, they became proxies for other people, not only in the war, but all the way from 1990s. And so the price is really being paid by them in a very heavy manner. Well, that's the nature of the way the international politics gets played. That's the way the cookie crumbles. If you have the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean on both sides in technological abilities, you have certain advantages. But if you're a country like Russia, with the kind of history, and as General Saab, you said, self-esteem, feeling nobody can ever defeat me, well, you are also a different kind of ball game from others which get taken up. So, I don't know, Colonel MP Singh, we have another 4 or 5 minutes. We can take a few more questions. But otherwise, we can. Well, here there are some other very good ones. Again, there is one lot about wanting to join NATO, etc. Those things are perhaps being answered one way or the other. Whether you wanted to join or you didn't want to join, I don't know what state you are going to be left with after this thing in some crumbling manner comes to an end. But anyway, General Saab, we'd like to hear your views. And the other thing is, how important is compulsory military training for Indian youth? Now, I think one of you mentioned the need of every Indian being a soldier. Now, I'm trying to take this literally, and that's what Mr. Rudram Mishra has also said. What exactly does this particular thing mean? What's your view on this? And how should we look at it? Because is this a kind of learning or is it not a learning? And then we come to the last question, and Mr. D.D. Pandey, and that is because we've discussed Ukraine, is the question of trust. You mentioned already the greed of the armament industry, but that's not new. It's not of today. It's been happening all throughout. But let's look at this particular sets of elements of compulsory military training. How is this the end, whatever the end is, 6 months, 8 months, or tomorrow, whenever it is, of this particular thing? How do you see it impacting world order, or at least European order in various ways? I think we'll stop after that. General Rajeshwar, the screen is yours first, and then General Sudhakar ji, and I'll hand over to Colonel. Sir, the screen is yours.
This aspect about compulsory military training, as you all know, if you put the armed forces together, and I'm not talking of the paramilitary forces which are standby and will do their duties in hinterland, we are already at 1.5 million. As a professional, I would like to train this 1.5 million in a better manner rather than train everybody. This is point one as far as military training is concerned. If I train them well, I think they are more than enough. One, we don't need to increase that manpower. I'm putting Army, Air Force, Navy all together. Okay. Now, the second point. When I say, when I alluded to national security strategy, I was also looking at what impact it will have on the rest of the nation. While it is not only whole of government, it is a whole of nation approach. Now, here I think the entire nation is at play. So whether it is our cyber warriors, whether it is our defense industrial complex, whether it is our energy, industry, whether it is our enterprises, our MSMEs, everybody has a huge role to play. And also, uh, you see, you are seeing 9 months of war. The question we must ask ourselves seriously is, do we have both equipment and ammunition for 30 days of war? I'm not saying 9 months, right? Because the rest will catch up, but do we have it? We should answer this honestly, and they should be known, because otherwise what will happen is we will reach a point and then we can't decide. So that is a very important, I mean, then we can't pull back once you are across. So this is as far as compulsory military training. So these are my specific answers. As far as the geopolitical thing in Europe is concerned, you see, till now, Iraq and Afghanistan were the places where weapons have gone, innumerable ones, and therefore I think the next 30-40 years in these countries will be totally turbulent. Now you're seeing the same thing happening inside Europe, right? And the western side, if you call Ukraine that way. So there is a proliferation of arms and ammunition. This is going to have a huge impact to my mind, because some innovations, improvisations have also been done. And there are a lot of weapon systems which are, which will obviously, because of war having taken place, will remain unaccounted for. And the nation would have got actually militarized in a manner which will be very tough. As far as the how does it go? I think both termination of war, which is called what is the end state, and the negotiations after the war, as we have learned, especially in Europe, they have to be carefully thought through. Because if there is another, breakdown, because one side or the other is not satisfied, you're going to have a repeat of this very, very soon. Will that, end up in World War III? Anybody's guess. So I think this is also a thing. It is India is, in any of these is going to be part of the solution. And I think that is the opportunity that we must exploit for our global standing. And that is an important thing. If we miss this, then you are not getting many more chances. So it is an important thing to have peace. And that is where I totally agree that I think peace dividend can come if we support this entire thing of, not only talking it, but walking it. Thank you so much.
Those are very well said. My understanding is straightforward. Whether you like it or not, you are going to be in it. Should you meddle around? I don't know. I'm not sure about last chances and so on and so forth. Sometimes, it's not a bad idea to let some khichdi cook on its own. But anyway, that's just a little bit facetiousness, a bit of fun here and there. Major General Sudhakar ji, sir, the screen is yours and you have the last word.
Can you repeat the question, sir?
I said the screen is yours. You have the last word on the subject of train everyone, get the entire country kind of involved in national defense, etc. for India.
Okay. I fully endorse what General Officer has just said, and I have a perspective to share. When I say that every citizen of the country should be like a soldier, it doesn't necessarily mean that he has to undergo military training. What I have in my mind is that soldiering is not all about picking up the weapon, joining armed forces, and targeting the enemy. Soldiering is also about inculcating some degree of discipline, some kind of a routine in life, the way the radicalization is spreading. There are different enemies, invisible enemies within the society. To combat such kind of invisible enemy, whole of nation approach is required. And in the whole of nation approach, it is not only the policeman's job, or it is not the government official's job to keep his eyes and ears open. It is every citizen's job to remain watchful and be aware of how the enemy can penetrate into their existence, make their life hell. So once they know that how the threat is going to manifest or how it is manifesting, preventive measures have to be adopted by one and all. So the threat which was earlier existing, external threat along the external boundary, has already gone across. The boundaries have got blurred. They're already into the hinterland. That is what I meant by saying that every citizen has to be like a soldier, not that he has to join armed forces to fight the Chinese and the Pakistanis on the border. Back to you. I hope I have answered the question, sir.
General Saab, thank you very much for your perspective. It's an important perspective, especially for a country going places. And in any case, all Indians must pull in the direction of a better, more powerful, if I may be allowed to use that word, and an India contributing much more to global good. I have no little doubt on that in my mind. But before I say thank you to you both and to EGROW, I want to say it's been a very stimulating discussion, because we've, of course, touched upon several issues which are germane to us domestically in India. But the issues about geopolitics, the issues of proxies, the issue of technological advances, the issues of innovation, artificial intelligence, all of these, which have been so succinctly brought out by all of you. And let me assure you that the words that you all used on drones have not gone unheard by all of us, because most of us don't have a particularly clear idea of how kind of game changers they could be in various ways. So I think this has really been fantastic. I want to thank you both, sir, Lieutenant General Rajeshwar and Major General Sudhakar ji, as well as to Colonel MP Singh and the EGROW team. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity for joining you for this discussion. And I sincerely hope that we will see the era of peace. It is a tough one, but not only should we hope for it, but let me also say, do what we can for that to be the case. All of us will be beneficiaries of it. The Climate Change Convention conference is going on. I have an old involvement with all of that. Believe me, people may ask, what does this have to do with that? The issue of climate change, which is otherwise being exacerbated by each of us living a better and better life, the kind of hits that has been taken as a result of this are almost unbelievable. So in every way, the planet, humanity, everything demands that, we look at it as we try to make this into an era of peace. That has its own problems, but certainly, I think, better than the situation of being in war and conflict. Thank you very much to everyone.
Thank you, Ambassador Puri, Colonel MP, General Sudhakar ji, EGROW, and all participants for your patient hearing. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, EGROW. And
Thank you, sir.
Colonel.
Sir,
Thank you very much. I just have a.
It is very effective, sir. Thank you
I
very
have a
much.
last question. Hello?
No, sir, we have ended it if you don't mind.
No, answered
Thank
almost
you.
all questions. Sir.
Now, my
Thank you.
questions are not answered.
Sir, we'll get back to you. We'll send it to the panelists and get back to you. There's a time limitation
Because
and we need to follow.
NATO is allowing new nations against the norms,
Sir,
NATO is allowing new nations to join against the norms, already accepted norms. And another one, what is your opinion regarding the Agnipath of the government of India? I want to know these answers for these two questions. But unfortunately, they are not answered.
yeah. Sir, may I just make a point on Agnipath? I'm sure EGROW will organize a separate seminar and,
But regarding NATO joining the new nations against the accepted norms. What is the opinion?
Would you please
Why
allow
it
me
is
to?
accepting the new nations again and again? Already accepted that not to allow other nations, but against the norms, accepted norms, NATO is allowing.
So, sir, would you allow me to say something to you? You made your point and you made a very valid point, and I appreciate that. But these are games that nations play. Please understand that. And as you want to be part of this global international governance structure, please note that even the paragons of morality, they also play their own games, and that's the nature of the human endeavor. Let's leave it at that. Colonel MP Singh, the screen is now yours.
Not audible.
Colonel MP Singh, you're not audible.
Sorry. Yeah. Thank you so much. Firstly, I'd like to thank everyone. But just a point on the Agnipath, since it was mentioned, when it was announced, a lot of debate took place in the media, in the armed forces, etc. Now it has about to be implemented. The trainings are about to start. Certainly, we'll have a deliberation on it, and I'm sure the armed forces will also be having a deliberation. They will be seeing the feedback and seeing how this scheme turns out. So the time will come when this will be certainly discussed. Let's see the implementation stage first. And with this, I would like to thank all the participants for this very stimulating session which you've created, and both the speakers, both the journals who have given their perspective of the learnings which we are going to have. And I would like to also announce that the coming week we are going to have Ambassador Shyam Saran talking about his new book on how China sees India and the world. This is going to be the next webinar coming up. And at the end, I would like, on behalf of EGROW, to thank everyone who joined us for this 1 hour session, which has actually gone to almost 1.5 hours. And the recording of this session will be available by tomorrow, or not by tomorrow, maybe by day after tomorrow on the YouTube channel. And you can see this recording. It will be available on our website also. So thank you very much, all the participants and the panelists and the chair. On behalf of EGROW, I would request all of you to continue to join us in all our webinars and contribute in the best possible way. We end the session here. Thank you, sir.